Okay, I'm recording. Stefan, thanks for doing this. Appreciate it. Thank you, Misty.
Well, thank you. It's great to be here.
Okay, so let's get this party started. The economy, wow. This pandemic has affected the economy. So many small businesses, so many people are hurting right now. But tell me, where does it rank, though, in importance, especially when it comes to the election, in the minds of so many people here in Michigan?
Well, it's a very good question. I think it's important to put things in perspective as well. In the spring, Michigan's economy was hit extraordinarily hard. The unemployment rate spiked to 24% in April. We had over 1 million cumulative job losses. So it's a very, very challenging situation. Now, since then, fortunately, there has been a recovery, which has been supported by large-scale fiscal stimulus. The unemployment rate has gone down to about 8.5% in September. Of those 1 million roughly job losses, about 60% have been recovered. So these are very positive developments. At the same time, the current unemployment rate is much higher than it was pre-pandemic, and the pace of the job recovery, particularly in August, September, has slowed. So despite this progress, we're still not out of the woods yet. And so I still think it's still a very front and center issue for voters, particularly as COVID infection rates are actually increasing across the state.
Yeah, I was going to bring that up. Just when we kind of sort of thought maybe, we were starting to all of a sudden, boom, we're in the second or third wave, depending on who you ask. And again, so many small businesses and not so small, look at the movie theaters, look at bowling alley, etc., having such a hard time. When we talk about West Michigan in particular, how is West Michigan done compared to the rest of the state?
Yes, well, I think it's important to note that the impact of the recession has not been uniform across the state. For one, people of color have been disproportionately affected by the recession for first. And second, if you look at, for example, Kent and Ottawa counties versus, let's say, Muskegon, Kent and Ottawa counties have lower unemployment rates now vis-a-vis the Michigan's rate, while Muskegon is actually quite higher than the Michigan's rate. So the impact of the recession has not been uniform across the state. It's affected different groups of people as well as different counties in different ways.
And again, let's talk about the election. We're what, 2 weeks? 2 weeks away from the election. And in general, in broad terms, there seems to be two philosophies when it comes to taxes. The GOP seems to want to cut. The Democrats propose increases on the richer folks. More than $400,000 a year. How do these different approaches affect the economy?
Well, at first, I think it's important that we really get the pandemic under control, which is critical for an economic recovery. You're not going to have a sustained economic recovery in Michigan or in the U.S. without a health recovery. So then there's a huge need, I think still a large need for additional fiscal stimulus that's being discussed now in Washington. I am hopeful that both sides can come together. But it's really important that Congress gets something done because there's going to be challenges in the future. Particularly with the COVID cases increasing, we have winters on the horizon in certain sectors like leisure and hospitality have been significantly impacted by this recession. It's going to be harder to, of course, serve people in the winter. So we have to be very cognizant of that and hope for a solution.
Well, yeah, because at least once these restaurants were able finally to open to limited capacity, they were able to seat people outdoors.
Yeah.
But now, the weather, that's going to be a challenge for them to do seating. And you mentioned, we've really only had one stimulus.
Yeah.
That one $1,200 check throughout this entire pandemic. And we know both sides of the aisle trying to come together to get another stimulus, but a lot of people still, $1,200 over a 7-month pandemic doesn't go very far for American families. What's the answer going to be for people who are still really hurting right now?
Yeah. Well, in addition, you mentioned the $1,200 cash payments. There's also the supplemental unemployment insurance that's part of the stimulus bill, $600 extra a week through roughly the end of July. So that's gone away too, which is very, very important. But I mean, again, folks are still really hurting in Michigan and across the country. Unemployment rate is still much higher than it was pre-pandemic. Again, job growth has slowed recently, and there are a lot of risks on the horizon. You mentioned, COVID rates, infection rates in the state are increasing, uncertainty over the fiscal stimulus path, and I'm hopeful that there can be an agreement, because the economy could slow quite a bit if some of these things aren't resolved.
And for people who are fortunate right now to still be working, okay,
Yeah.
what advice would you give to them to get themselves in a position now to protect themselves if, God forbid, say in a few months, their situation changes?
Yeah. Well, I mean, historically, Americans don't tend to save that much on a household basis. Savings rates did increase considerably at the onset of the crisis. So I would recommend putting more aside. Interest rates are low, but it's still important to have a financial cushion, because you never know what's going to happen in the future, and you never know if things take a turn for the worse. So I would advise keep making sure your saving goals are being met.
Stefan, thank you so much for your time and for your advice. We really appreciate it.
No, thank you for being here. I appreciate it.
All right, thank you. Bye-bye.